This Thursday in Cairo, an important twist on Egypt's road to civilian rule. Khairat al-Shater filing the paperwork to run for president under the banner of the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party. Before sweeping constituent assembly elections, the Brotherhood had pledged not to run in the presidential race. But ahead of next Sunday's deadline for nominations, there's been a change of heart. For detractors, it's a case of blind ambition. For supporters, it's a way of countering more hardline Salafists from outflanking everyone in Egypt's first open presidential poll, first round due next month. A worry that reports suggest has Washington privately condoning the Brotherhood's bid. Should we be heartened or worried by the latest turn in Egypt's unfinished revolution? And what brand of political Islam does the Brotherhood, what do the Egyptians want? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Egypt's presidential race. And with us from Cairo, Nader Amran of the Muslim Brotherhood's Freedom and Justice Party. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, sir. And
from Washington, Eric Traeger of the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Hello to you.
Thanks for having me.
Shahir Rigo of Solidarité Copte France, an organization that's an advocacy group for the Coptic Christian community. Thank you for being with us. And François Picard, journalist and member of Egypt Solidarity, a Franco-Egyptian group that was formed right after the uprising began in Tahrir Square. Thank you for being with us.
Nice to meet you again.
The France 24 debate, where you can always weigh in on the conversation, and you have been doing so on Facebook and also on Twitter, our handle at FrancoisF24. So let's see. He's a 61-year-old millionaire businessman, the Deputy Supreme Guide of the Muslim Brotherhood, Khairat al-Shater, a political prisoner under Hosni Mubarak, now filing the paperwork to run for president. Eric Traeger, what do we know about him?
Well, what we know is that he's one of the top leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's the Deputy Supreme Guide. He's someone who's typically described as an organization man, meaning that he is viewed as the most administratively competent and has really helped mobilize the Brotherhood into the political force that it is. He's a businessman. He's actually a millionaire, which is part of the reason the regime had put him away. So he's considered a very competent person. But the fear here, I think, is that he's competent at pushing an agenda that is very contrary or could be very contrary to American interests.
Could be contrary to American interests, yet we're seeing reports, the New York Times over the weekend quoting sources privately that's saying that they were egging the Muslim Brotherhood to go on and get a candidate in there.
Well, I think there is real concern here about the emergence of the Salafists. The Salafists took about a quarter of the parliament in the last elections. That was very surprising to many people in Washington. So the Brotherhood is seen as more pragmatic. One thing that I would emphasize, though, is that when it comes to what we would call the important issues in Washington, things like the Camp David Accords, which is the treaty with Israel, cooperation on counterterrorism, human rights, protecting the rights of minorities, it's not completely clear to me and to many in Washington that the Brotherhood and Salafists disagree on those things. If anything, it seems like they disagree on the speed with which maybe they want to break the treaty or the speed with which they want to implement some very rigid interpretations of Islamic law.
Nader Amran, should Washington be worried about a Muslim Brotherhood candidate for president?
Not at all. There is no need to be worried at all. I think we have our own policy. We have been practicing politics for more than 30 years now, and we have experience. And our policy is just to try to go ahead with Egypt for progress, for development. And we are not intending to clash with anybody, with any party.
Would you go back, for instance, on the would you go back on the peace agreement with Israel?
I think we have declared before that everything in Egypt for the time being are not going to change, but this is up to the parliament, up to democracy. If they decide, that the majority of the people decide to reconsider any agreement or treaty, it's their decision.
And tell us how it's been going down inside of your party. We know that the decision to field a candidate was not an easy one. What made you change your mind?
Actually, so many things have made us change our mind. Actually, at the very beginning, 1 year ago, we declared that we are not going to name any candidate for presidency. But as you can see, there have been so many developments over the past 1 year. So we have decided this. First of all, the current cabinet, the current government is a great failure. They could not meet the ambitions of the people. Second, the SCAF does not allow us as a majority of the parliament to form a coalition government, which we cannot apply our platform. Third, we are sometimes threatened by dissolving the parliament, which means that the only elected power in Egypt can be dissolved anytime. That's why we changed our mind and we decided to name a candidate for presidency in order to find a channel to apply our platform.
So let me ask you on this. Where does it leave, for instance, there was Abdel Monem Abou Foutou, a one-time prominent dissident. He was expelled from the Muslim Brotherhood several months ago for doing what Al-Shater is doing now, running for president.
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, so many people have been asking this question. Actually, Dr. Abou Foutou, who is a prominent figure of Muslim Brotherhood, has been fired because simply he went against the will or against the decision of the majority of the Muslim Brotherhood at the same time. And if Engineer Shatter does the same these days and decided not to run for the elections, he will be fired as well. It's democracy and institutionalism. It's just not a personal opinion.
Sorry, so
nothing personal.
He didn't respect party discipline. Shahir Rigo, Muslim Brotherhood, how do you feel about them fielding a candidate?
To be honest, I cannot really trust the Brotherhood. During their 84 years of long history working behind the scenes in Egypt, they were not really known for respecting their promises.
All right, so you're not going to vote for them, but what do you? But should they be allowed to field a candidate?
They should be allowed to vote because they
to field a candidate, to have a candidate.
Yes, they themselves said just after the 25th of January, when they started really appearing among the revolutionary groups, they themselves said that they were not going to name a candidate for presidency.
And François Pradal, your thoughts?
At first,
I think they have the right to candidate, even if they said they won't. But the problem is more about their political programs, what they will achieve. There was a revolution on 25th January 2011 who asked for freedom, social justice, and better conditions of life for Egyptians. Muslim Brotherhood, they have a part of power. They have been elected to the parliament, to the Shura Council, the Senate, and they haven't proposed or achieved any reform since last February. So first point, they haven't achieved.
It's early days, though, for the Constituent Assembly.
Yes, and for the Constitution, they asked for a wide committee for the Constitution who will not be led only by Muslim Brotherhood. And we saw them with the acts that they just want to have the majority of the seats for this committee. So people in Egypt are very anxious about the fact that they will make the Constitution by themselves only, without the liberals, without the churches, without even El-Azhar, who withdrew from the committee. So there are many points we saw them not to go in the way of...
Let's explain that point for viewers who perhaps aren't versed with Egyptian politics. More than 20 panel members have resigned from the Assembly's 100-strong committee in charge of drawing up a constituent assembly. They include a representative of Al-Azhar University, what many consider the world's most prestigious Sunni learning institute, representatives of the Christian Coptic Church, and also liberal lawmakers.
This assembly was set up in the absence of regulations and rules of nomination. This presents a negative message, stating that this assembly doesn't represent Egyptian society as a whole. I wouldn't like to contribute to this negative message.
Nader Amran, will you be drawing up a constitution with or without those that have slammed the door on that committee?
I think we haven't reached a conclusion yet, because what I've heard today that right now the main committee is going on and these withdrawals have not affected very much, but there is some news that is going to be reformed again afterwards. But it's not, I mean, allow me to disagree with what has been said about this committee. The people now who are opposing this committee are basically, originally, last year were the people were asking for the SCAF to form this committee without even elected members. So it's not a matter of election. We are majority, I mean, Islam is majority in the parliament, but we are almost 38% of this committee. So we are not majority. We are not trying to monopolize this committee.
All right, we can perhaps call up a chart which shows you the makeup of the Constituent Assembly. And in that Constituent Assembly, you'll see it was a landslide for the Freedom and Justice Party and its allies. And in fact, sort of a jousting there between those that are even more Islamist than the Freedom and Justice Party and its partners. Eric Traeger, again, it's early days for that Constituent Assembly. So far, what are the signs in terms of the way it's being run?
Well, I mean, the key sign, I think, is that they appointed Saad al-Khattatni, who's also the Muslim Brotherhood's parliamentary speaker, to chair the Constituent Assembly. So it's quite clear that the Muslim Brotherhood is trying to dominate the constitution writing process. They've also put 27 Brotherhood members of parliament on the committee. They've put very few Christians. One of those Christians happens to be a member of their own party. So they've really stacked the deck in their favor. I mean, substantively...
And excuse me for interrupting, but why not? Since, after all, they won the lion's share of votes.
That's true, they did win the lion's share of votes, but the whole practice of writing a constitution is to create a system that can endure no matter who comes to power. What the Brotherhood is clearly trying to do is establish an Islamic State through the constitution right now, so that if there's any change in power, it will be very, very hard for any kind of other party to maneuver. The other thing that the Brotherhood is doing, just substantively, is it's trying to weaken the power of the president and strengthen the power of the parliament. This is really consistent with the Brotherhood's view that its parliamentary victory should have given it more power than just appointing the Constituent Assembly, but constitutionally it doesn't have that power. Mr. Amran said that the reason they're nominating a presidential candidate is because the SCAF, the military, wouldn't allow them to appoint a cabinet. But under the Constitution, they have no authority. The parliament has no authority to appoint a cabinet. So they were demanding a power that they simply don't have legally, and created this pretense to then backtrack on a promise not to run a presidential candidate. There is a real power grab going on here, and people really need to draw a certain lesson from that.
You're saying that they're showing intent to create an Islamic State. What are the tangible signs of that?
Tangible sign of that is that they want to strengthen Article 2 of the Egyptian Constitution that says that the Sharia is the primary source of law. There have been some rumblings that that will have an even more conservative framing that actually makes the Sharia the only source of law. And just one other thing that happened today, the presidential candidate Khairat al-Shater, who we were speaking about earlier, he said that he wants clerics to have a role in the legislative process. I mean, that is theocracy. And it's very clear that the Brotherhood wants to use its dominance of the constitutional process to do what has always been their plan, which is to make Egypt an Islamic State.
Let me ask you, Nader Amram, the clerics with a bigger say in the political process, what does that mean exactly?
Actually, I disagree with all what has been said. Actually, if you look, I mean, take a closer look to this Constituent Committee, actually 80% of Egyptian constitution is no problem. Nobody even argue about it. The only two things which are there we should change with the Egyptian constitution is two things. First of all, the situation of the SCAF, the military, and the constitution, and the opposition, I mean. And the second thing is the Egyptian system is going to be parliamentary or mixed or presidential, and we are actually tend for to be mixed. So these are the only two issues. Nobody argue with the first 80% of the constitution. This is one thing. Second thing, everybody is denying one very important point, that this constitution or draft, even it's going to be 100% written by Islamists, is going to be put for election, for referendum. So people can say no. So if you bring another 100 people and make another constitution which our liberals are so satisfied about, and nobody will say nobody will say yes in the referendum, it will not be applied. So it's up to the people, not up to the Islamists or liberals or whatever.
But are you in favor of clerics having a say on legislation?
Of course, it's not the clerics. Everybody should be represented in this committee, and we asked everybody to take part in this committee. Clerics, Azhar, Copts, church, syndicates, youth. Everybody should be represented in this constitution. Don't just look at the part which you want to emphasize. I mean.
And should there be some form of Sharia law?
Actually, the second article of the Egyptian constitution is there since 1923, and there has been no problem with that from Copts. Even if you ask the Coptic church here about the second article, he said no problem with that. We agree because it's the source, because we are majority here, and nobody even argued with this article. The people who are raising the issue of this article, second article of the article number 2 of the constitution, are the people who want to really make some confusion. I mean.
So here we go. Your thoughts on that?
Yes, this is a very serious problem. It's true that the Egyptian constitution was based on the Sharia law for a long time. But what this person did not really mention is that in 1971, it was a little bit changed by Anwar al-Sadat, who said it will be the source of legislation. Before that, it was one of the sources. When Anwar al-Sadat came, he said it's going to become the source of legislation. So there is a slight difference, nuance between the two. Now, what the Muslim Brotherhood wants to do is openly and factually just apply the Sharia. This is their first and foremost objective. I don't think they can deny this.
Okay, so we've heard both sides of the argument on that issue. What about, you've been mentioning several times, Nader Amram, relationships with the ruling military, with the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces. By fielding a presidential candidate, does that set you up for a showdown with the SCAF?
Yeah, if there has been an agreement or a deal with the SCAF, so you are right, but there hasn't been any deal for the SCAF. If you go through what happened last year, we are the only people who declared from the very beginning, from February 10th, that SCAF should go back and military should go back to their barracks as soon as possible. And at that time, we were accused of being hopeful for power. And afterwards, some months afterwards, we are the only people who opposed the previous Deputy Prime Minister's document of the draft constitution, which gives the SCAF a special position in the constitution. So on the ground, we are the only party which always have been there in front of the SCAF.
We're gonna pick up on that point. The only party in the forefront against the SCAF. When we come back, this is the France 24 debate.